All right, here we go. Welcome back to the PT Graduate Podcast. And my guest today is Mr. Brad Norris from Synergy Health.
G'day, Rich. How are you?
Good, thank you. Very well indeed. Very well. Good to see you again, Brad, and great to be able to carve out a little bit more time to be able to, I guess, continue the conversation we had the other day, probably.
Oh, fantastic. It's an honor to be on the show.
That's very kind of you. And I think you're a great example of what I was wanting to do this year compared to last year on the podcast, is to sort of start talking to people that weren't specifically necessarily doing that PT thing, but were still definitely within that health space, to sort of broaden people's horizons a little bit and help them see what else is going on out there, what people are doing, how that could be something they're interested in moving towards, or go, right, no, well done, that's not for me, So it's great to be able to talk to you today and pick your brains, because I know there's plenty of them. And,
thank you. Well, I like to feel like I'm part of yours and your listeners' tribe, because initially I was a personal trainer as I was working my way through university. I did my master's in organizational psychology, but worked as a personal trainer. Now, this was going back 20 something odd years ago, when personal training just really wasn't a big thing. So my roots come from personal training.
Awesome.
So I can appreciate obviously some of the challenges that you encounter as a PT.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I guess that's a beautiful beginning point, is kind of understanding a bit more about your backstory. And obviously you did your master's, like you say, and you've got, is it also a bachelor's in industrial and organizational psychology? So I did my master's in applied psychology. It's sometimes called industrial and organizational psychology. I did a PE diploma at the same time. I did it concurrently. And it was really going through university, doing that master's in org psych was one whereby I was surprised. It was ended up being 4 years of study around getting the most out of people, and obviously aligning them with the right job, picking the right person, motivating them, and getting the best out of those people. And I was surprised that after all of that time, we only did half an hour work around employee health and well-being. And I was just shocked. I thought, this is crazy. This is crazy. It's such a fundamental pillar to someone's overall engagement and performance and so on. So from that, I decided to start Synergy Health straight out of university, which again is 21 years or so ago now. And over that time, obviously the industry has evolved and changed somewhat, but our overall goal now is how do we promote employee health and well-being in order to obviously maximize employee performance, but equally so enhance the performance of organizations. Was that the motivator for starting it? You talk about that half an hour, and it's almost like doctors that get the same amount of nutrition qualification, isn't it? In terms of time. Was that the Kickstarter?
You're absolutely bang on the money, Rich, and it was, because I'd seen it through my personal training experience, the impact that you could have on someone by improving their well-being. So for me to kind of go through all of that study and then kind of do half an hour on employee well-being, and at the same time, I was hearing a lot about some of the initiatives that were happening overseas. So when I was kind of winding up my studies, I kind of looked across New Zealand to see, well, who was doing this sort of thing? And the only thing that I really found was flu vaccinations and the odd pre-employment screening. So I kind of thought, well, why not? Naivety is a powerful thing. I gave it a crack. I took a swing.
Nice. I guess that's probably a good thing, isn't it? It is good to take risks and try things, but sometimes naivety can be a really, really good thing, because you're not overthinking the possibilities, the downsides. You're just going, well, I can see a need. Let's have a crack. Exactly.
And I have to say, I always say it was a combination of naivety and persistence, because it took 2 years, literally 2 years, before I secured my first client. So I was personal training along the side. I was doing evenings as a personal trainer, working on the business during the day. So it was a tough sell back then, but obviously over the last 20 years, the whole awareness around employee well-being has significantly improved.
Yeah.
But interestingly, we're still dealing with the same challenges that personal trainers obviously have, and that's, well, how do you facilitate behaviour change?
Yes.
Essentially, that's what we're all asking. That's the holy grail of the work that I think we do, is how do you facilitate behaviour change? And I think, you know, for any personal trainers listening or anyone in the health industry, if you don't consider yourself an expert in behaviour change, well, we're kind of got to ask ourselves, well, what is our role? Because essentially we're trying to encourage and motivate and facilitate that long-term behaviour change in a way that people will benefit from those health improvements over a long period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are in the behaviour change business. You're right.
Absolutely. Firmly in that space.
Yeah.
Firmly in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we can miss that, I think. You know, it's it can be a little bit more about, you know, big biceps and you know, eating salads all day, every day, and suddenly things aren't necessarily changing the way you would expect, or the way clients might expect. So it's coming back to basics, isn't it? And sort of saying, right, what is it? What is your goal? What's your number one priority? What's getting in the way of that currently? Well, what can we do to remove obstacles and change behavior over a long period of time? It doesn't happen overnight, does it? And I guess
No.
I'm no expert because I'm struggling for my words here, but that's why you're here, Brad.
Hey, look, I'd have to say, look, the fundamental mistake that I see personal trainers making, and hey, look, I'm still kind of got links into the industry, but the fundamental mistake I see personal trainers making, but I also see it in our industry with health and well-being experts that are working within organizations, is that they believe what motivates them is going to motivate their clients, their employees.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, the hard reality is well-being and health improvements is not a key driver for most people's behavior. Now, that's not to say it's not a priority, but they're often prioritizing other things over and above that, which means that obviously they're not prioritizing some of those healthy behaviors during the day. Now, that's a hard and fast reality that the sooner the health industry gets on board with, the sooner we're actually going to have the opportunity to actually genuinely facilitate behavior change, which we can go into a little bit more detail. But that is fundamentally the mistake that I see people making, is they say, well, I'm motivated by this. Surely you are. When that's just not the case. It's not the case. We need to adapt our style depending on who we're interacting with, and appeal to what is driving their existing behaviors, not expecting them to completely transform what motivates and engages them. The only time that that is relevant is when they experience a health scare, and then all of a sudden that value of health and well-being gets promoted to the top of the list. Then you can pretty much tell them to do anything to promote their well-being and they'll do it. But unfortunately, that mentality of that whole ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, we can't obviously afford to do that. So what is already influencing their daily decision makings, and how can we appeal to that to influence that behavior change? And that's what we've found to be incredibly effective through the initiatives that we roll out across organizations. But I'm fortunate enough to still work with individuals where that's central to how you actually get people to change their behaviors.
Yeah. So is it more than just about asking the right questions?
Yeah, I think it's about certainly asking the right questions, but often it's about uncovering what the participant isn't even aware of. You know, often the participant isn't even aware of what engages them. You know, we're kind of going through this age at the moment where we're so busy. You know, we often talk about business as usual as busyness as usual. And we're firefighting so many demands currently that we often lose sight as to what uniquely drives our own behavior. You know, it's not uncommon for us to go through a whole range of initiatives, and, you know, people are kind of going, well, I'm not really sure what motivates me. I'm not 100% sure what is essentially important. And for us, the approach that we take is we help people uncover what their personal values are. That's got to be the starting point in any initiative, because once we understand what are those personal values, what is influencing their daily decision making, we can then align the program to essentially promote those values. Because of course, when people have the option between A and B, they will choose whichever behavior gives them a better chance to promote their personal values. When you give them the chance to promote those personal values, they are more motivated, more engaged in the process, and are more likely to obviously achieve the outcomes when they do that. Now, this is where, obviously COVID is a topical thing at the moment, where because our environment is changing so quickly, it's actually compromising people's ability to promote their personal values, because that environment is shifting so quickly, which is why stress is, obviously escalating, and people are finding it, certainly a challenging environment. But I'll give you a tangible example, Richard. This will kind of put it in context, particularly from an individual perspective. I had a scenario where I had this fella, a good mate of mine. He owns a gym. He essentially was trying to help this guy lose 10 kilos. He wanted to lose 10 kilos. And basically he was losing 6 or 7 kilos and then putting all the weight back on. And he was cycling through this for what was about 2 years.
Okay.
And he said, why don't you go and chat to Brad? He said, go and chat to Brad. And this guy comes into my office, sits down. And I said, well, tell me about yourself. And he goes, I'm a salesperson. He said, I'm in the top 2 in the country. He said, I always meet my targets. He said, I'm always, I've got a lot of money. I can buy whatever pretty much I want. I have lunches with the who's who, like layering it on. And I've just met this guy, right? I've just met this guy.
Yeah.
And in the first probably 10 to 15 minutes, he talked nothing about his successes and the recognition he gets. So for me, immediately, I didn't even need to do a personal value session. I knew recognition was particularly important to this guy.
Yeah.
So I said to him, look, just stop there for a second. I said, just stop there. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, look, how many people know you want to lose 10 kilos? And he goes, he's thinking about it. And he goes, 2. And I said, who? And he goes, well, my personal trainer and you. And I said, well, that's generous. I've just met you. I said, look, please just stop the session there. I said, I don't need to talk to you anymore.
Yep.
He said, what do you mean? And I said, I want you to go out and tell 10 people you want to lose 10 kilos. Nice. He's like, all right then. So he goes away, comes back a week later, sits down. And I said, so did you tell your 10 people? He goes, yep. And I said, good stuff. Who'd you tell? And he goes, what do you want to know that for? And I said, I want to ring them. I want to make sure you told them.
Ooh.
His head goes down. He's like, I'll see you next week. Gets up, leaves.
Nice.
He literally comes back 2 weeks later, and he's got a piece of paper with all the names and numbers and everything on it. I said, look, I'm way too busy to ring them, but thanks for your list anyway. So what happened? 8 weeks later, lost 10 kilos. Why did that happen? Now, the reason that happened, he didn't tell anyone because he didn't want to compromise that value of recognition. As soon as people knew about it, in order for him to promote that value of recognition or to protect that value of recognition, he had to lose the weight. It wasn't about well-being at all. It was about recognition. So as soon as you can structure someone's program in order to help them promote their individual personal values, you're more likely to engage them, and they're more likely to achieve those end goals. Now, let's take something as simple as, say, movement, walking. From a values perspective, the difference between walking in a treadmill at 6 a.m. in the back of a gym versus going for a walk on a beach, different from a values perspective. Wearing a device to capture your steps, different from a values perspective. Walking with a friend or a loved one, different from a values perspective. So depending on what values we can align our programs to will determine how engaged people are in those programs. Where trainers in particular make a mistake, and where, even the people in our industry, is they rely on people's willpower to get them through the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And people will have that sense of, well, I'm trying really, really hard and I'm just got to persist. I've just got to persist. I've just got to persist. And then all of a sudden, it's not strategically designed their program, which means they're going to revert back to their old behaviors sooner rather than later. And of course, not achieve those end goals.
Yeah, brilliant. That's an awesome example. Thank you for that, Brad. And I suspect that that's one of many great stories that you have ready to go at a moment's notice that kind of moves people's thinking to another level in terms of understanding that behavior change. Is that, I mean, obviously that's a process that you follow in terms of your programs, but as you were describing that, and I was thinking, yeah, okay, this guy's a recognition guy. If you're working with an organization that's got, let's say, 300, 500 employees, maybe even bigger, how do you capture there's potentially 300 different, different, I guess, levers that you might need to pull
Definitely.
to hit the right spot for those people. So how do you customize something when it's on such a large scale? I mean, you don't need to necessarily give all your secrets away, but you know what I'm asking?
Happy to share. Happy to share, Rich. Happy to share. And you're bang on the money. Like that is the goal, and that's what was exciting about, going from personal training to essentially more population-based health management. So we're incredibly fortunate to work with organisations like, New Zealand Police, ASB, Inland Revenue, Fonterra globally, and so on. So, some of the organisations we look after have 50,000 employees.
Yeah.
So you're right. Well, how do you serve up something that is personalised to the individual to ensure that they get the opportunity to fully engage in a program? So, for us, we're always running initiatives to try and help people get clarity around what those personal values are. So whether it's anything from an online challenge through to webinars, through to content, we're always talking about, get clarity around what those personal values are, because as soon as you give people that insight and give them the insight that actually everybody has a unique set of personal values because we've had different life experiences, you almost give them that sense of personal ownership. Well, I need to take responsibility for that personal value fulfillment, because if I'm not doing that, who is?
Sure.
So by simply giving them that revelation, often they're more likely to start making those connections. However, the other aspect that we do is we often run these population-based health challenges, which are web-based. So we've got unique technology which we build. But essentially what it does is it has elements that appeal to certain value sets. So for example, we might have a challenge where individuals do it. We have challenges where we'll put teams together.
Yeah.
We have initiatives where there's points allocated. We have initiatives where they aren't.
Right.
We have the opportunity whereby they can be in teams, earn points, and appear on a leaderboard, or alternatively, choose not to be on the leaderboard. So we have these value fulfilling elements through our program to appeal to a broad range of people, which means they're more likely to tap in the things that are most likely to motivate them. Now, what amazes me is we can get people pretty much doing anything, which is hilarious, but ultimately it's about obviously that ongoing sustainable change. Yeah. So we include other elements over a longer period of time to try and help facilitate that behavior in the longer term.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a great question. And it's always one that personally, I don't think we've fully cracked that yet. But that's the passion, that's the desire to how do you completely crack that in order to get to that state. But, certainly, and I know, when you look at it and say, food manufacturers, and I know in our industry, and I'm talking about your industry, our industry, we often are very critical of food manufacturers. But however, we've got a lot to learn from them. I think, just my view, personally my view, is that rather than absolutely, slamming them and, criticizing them for all the evil they've created in this world, I actually think the health industry has got a lot to learn from those organizations. Because if you look at something like, let's say a McDonald's, and hey, look, they do some cracking work, but equally so, in terms of, you look at, what values are they trying to appeal to? Well, fun is the most obvious one. Their icon is a clown. They've got the Happy Meal. They're one of the largest toy manufacturers in the world. They have a playground in their, in their stores. All of these elements are appealing. Do you think people go, actually, I'd love to go to kids I'm talking in particular, do they go, oh my gosh, I'd love to go and taste some chips? Well, they can get chips anywhere. Yeah. They're going for that experience, the things that are motivating them to want to be there. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen them, but those Bean Boozled jelly beans that you see, that they gamify the act of spinning a wheel and tasting jelly beans of different flavors, a lot of them tasting terrible. Yeah. Kids and parties love it. It's gamifying that play factor in order to engage kids to want to do that. Yet we just want people to walk more. They're eating jelly beans that taste like nappies. We've got a lot to learn, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because there are so many opportunities to, these companies aren't massively successful by accident.
No,
They've put a lot of time and effort, and there's a lot of science that's gone into to get them where they've got to today. So it sounds like there are elements of that in your program. So you talked about points and talked about a leaderboard, and these are all elements that sound like you're sort of gamifying the process of health so that people are, I guess, participating, or if they're competitive or whatever it may be, that's pressing their buttons to keep them engaged.
100%. And gamification really is appealing to people's value sets, right? Like whether it's achievement, whether it's success, but equally so, I think probably where, I guess, our approach being a little bit different is those gamifying elements. You know, we want our users have the ability to turn off or on. So, for example, you know, a challenge might be, actually, let's have that leaderboard, but that could be compromising people's values, right? So if someone has a value set around comfort, stability, security, they don't want to appear on that. They're kind of a little bit more perhaps introverted. They don't want to kind of be seen on that. We need to give them the ability to essentially not appear. Right. So I guess it is gamifying principles, but more importantly, those principles need to align with different, obviously, individuals. Now, my view, and I guess this is where, you know, I see a need, and, you know, particularly around mental health aspects, there seems to be a lot of need, and there seems to be a lot of programs. Right. When there's more need, there's more programs appear. We need to actually help people align what is uniquely going to work for them. Because I've seen it in the past where you get individuals aligned with a program because they've heard a significant other or friend, or they've read it somewhere, has had a huge success. So they engage in it, but it actually compromises their values, which leaves them completely disengaged. So people need to get that clarity about what's uniquely important to them, and then understand, well, how do I promote those things in the behavior that I'm choosing to engage in? Not just the outcome, but the process, and how do I get there? Because in the gym industry, unfortunately, people are choosing these goals where the end goal promotes their values, but not the process in getting there. And we're wondering why exercise adherence rates are historically poor, with 50% of people pulling out of a structured exercise program within the first 6 weeks.
Is that the stat? Jeez, crikey. That's sad.
It is. But again, because often it's the end goal that essentially is promoting the value fulfillment, but the process isn't. And often when we have trainers that I think, you know, and look, don't get me wrong, I know there's some phenomenal trainers out there, you know, ones that I learn a lot from. But ultimately, there are a lot of trainers out there as well that has a one-size-fits-all for every, you know, I guess, client they have, and then it becomes a real hit and miss. The good trainers will essentially understand, well, okay, what is essentially driving this person, even down to, well, the conversation that you have with your client needs to enable them to promote their personal values. Well, what does that look like? Well, if someone is very much geared around their successes at work, achievement, progress, if you spent a session while training them and talking to them about their successes at work, I guarantee you they will walk away incredibly energized, incredibly motivated, and wanting to come back. Someone else, however, may be more family orientated and very much, you know, around their children and around their kids, and it's about their kids succeeding and achieving. If you're talking to them about that, they will walk away feeling motivated, energized, and wanting to come back. Do you adapt your style or don't you? Because if you don't adapt your style, you're missing out on an opportunity to engage those clients and maintain those retention rates.
It sounds like it's a phrase I came across a while ago, situational leadership. You know, you're adapting to what's in front of you, rather than just, as you said, that one size fits all approach. And I guess, again, it comes back to listening, right? We've got 2 of these and 1 of these, and, you know, we should be listening more than we're speaking in that role, because that's where the gold is when we're not talking. That's where we pick up the things you just described, so that we can engage, go, right, that's that person's button as opposed to that person's button.
Can't agree more, Richard. And you bang on the money, because people often say, well, how do you identify people's values? You know, how do you do that? And, you know, obviously we've got some stuff that we, you know, the far end of the continuum that we kind of guide people through. But in its simplest way, the single best way is just to listen to people. And rather than listen to what they're saying, think about the value that is driving that conversation. So try and kind of look below the surface and constantly ask yourself, well, what are the values that this person is promoting by what they're talking about? Because if you let someone just talk, they will naturally gravitate towards what their values are, and they will want to talk about those things. So don't jump in there, don't steer the conversation, let them talk. But as they start talking a bit quicker, they become a little bit more animated. They're talking on the things that are their hot buttons.
Yes.
Think about the values that are influencing those things, and then try to align it to that directly. But hey, from my perspective, every personal trainer should have a personal values-based intro into their programming from day one. That should be a factor.
Yeah. I like that bit you just picked up on there about the speed of their conversation. So you're looking for the energy change so that you can see the difference when they start talking. Let's say it's about their kids or it's about work, whatever. That's where the energy might change. They might get a bit faster. They might get a bit more animated, and that's the gold. That's the bit you start going, yes, I've hit the spot. Now I need to know, well, now I need to take that forward so that each session has some element of tapping into that each time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it gets into those routines, right? Like let's say you've got that client who, who come in and they might have had a rough day, and you can obviously, I remember reading it super quick. You knew straight away, how someone was feeling. And what you can do, that old adage, what people focus on is what they feel. So you could have someone coming in and you say, well, hey, rough day, you might have a bit of a chat about it, but then you'd say, well, okay, what's happened that's been great this week? And often what they say, that very first thing is often associated with an emotional response. So you can ask values-based questions like, what went particularly well this week? And if they say, oh, little Johnny did it, or I managed to do this at work, or I had this success at work, or I achieved my PB on whatever it is, think about that, put that down in your notes, understand that when that client comes in, if you can focus and gear the conversations around those things, the mere act of seeing you becomes an opportunity to promote their personal values.
Yeah.
That alone, that alone can maximize or enhance your retention rates.
It's really powerful, isn't it? It's that same adage of people don't remember what you said or what you did. They remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what's happening there, isn't it? They probably couldn't necessarily put their finger on it when they were describing what you do and what happened during a session, but they know, they've got that sense that you did the right things for them on that day, and they want to come back for more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to give you an idea, I mean, we'll run anything from like a half hour to an hour long webinar right through to a 3-day leadership course sort of thing. So we do everything in between, but in our day or half day session, and we're actually taking people through how to identify their personal values. Often we'll get people in sort of groups talking and defining the values. We do all sorts of things, but essentially most people are like, do we really have to do this? And I'm often like, well, yeah, you do, because we're running the session, so unfortunately you're just going to have to do it.
Yeah.
But we can't stop people talking about their personal values. The chatter, as soon as people start talking about themselves, the whole energy of the room improves. People love talking about themselves. They really do. Even those that you'd say maybe not, just slowly kind of let them, obviously gravitate towards those things that are uniquely important to them.
Yeah.
And you will watch them literally change in front of you. I can guarantee. I used to do it all the time. I had cracking retention rates, but that's because my programs were designed around people's personal values. It wasn't a one size fits all.
That's phenomenal. There's some real, I mean, this is a whole psychology thing, which I'm fascinated by. What could trainers do to sort of tap into some of these nuggets of gold for themselves? I mean, obviously listen to this for a start, but where could they go to sort of school themselves up a little bit more on some of these things?
Yeah, I feel like, any sort of anything in that personal value space, I'd be delving down into.
Right.
But I have been lucky enough to work with a few trainers in the past, and I always say to them, the best research you can do is with your client base. Actually spend some time, go through that process of listening to what they say, thinking what are the values that are driving this. Try some different things with those clients and kind of build your library of strategies that come with that, and essentially trial and error. You've got a live database that you can essentially practice on. Each time you do a session, focus on, well, what am I going to do different this time? That's values based. And then kind of capture that and kind of build your library and your skill set around this sort of stuff. And, like I used to do as for individuals, we now do from a population perspective. And it's important to kind of go, well, okay, these elements work here and these elements work here. Next time I deal with someone who's like that, I know that's going to work. Okay. And kind of build your own library and skill set along the way.
I like that. That's awesome. Yep, definitely on the list.
Yeah, nice one.
I'm very aware of our time and not wanting to take up too much more of yours. So, any sort of, I think we need a part 2, Brad. This is just this is not going to be enough. You've kind of dropped beautiful tips in all the way through and some great stories, but I always sort of finish with top tips and some things that people have done that have worked really well for them, or things they've learned that they wouldn't do again. Anything on the tip of your tongue that you sort of think could be good final tips?
Oh, hey, Rich, look, I could talk about this stuff all day. I'm pretty passionate about it. I think, hey, look, the big thing, I think, as I say, I see the fundamental challenge that people in our industry have is that we're so passionate about it. We see the personal benefits, but don't assume people feel the same way, and I see people doing programming for people like themselves. It would engage me, so of course it's going to engage other people, when that's just fundamentally not the case. We need to kind of look beyond that and say, well, okay, what is driving and motivating other people's behavior, not my own, other people's behavior. Secondary to that, and maybe this is a part 2 component to that, is understand what is driving your behavior as a personal trainer. And I know in my experience, it was one around, helping people, seeing people make progress. So what did I do? Anytime a client made progress, I captured that. I wrote that down and centralized it in a document. Whenever I felt like I kind of wasn't achieving what I wanted to achieve, I'd go back and review that list.
Right.
And all of a sudden it promoted my personal values around helping people achieve and progress. So think about your own personal value fulfillment as well. And how do you strategically design your week to promote those things that are uniquely important to you as a trainer? Because that's a key consideration as well.
Yeah, I like that. You're absolutely right, because there are always tough times, right? And sometimes that's when we can question ourselves. But if we've got a process like that you just described, that can really keep us centered and sort of on purpose at a time when we may be wavering or we may be unsure of ourselves. So I love that. That's really powerful.
Yes, hey, look, especially during COVID times where our environment is constantly changing, we want to make sure that we're kind of anchoring those things that are uniquely important to us and actually taking responsibility for that and ownership for that. We want to, and this is something we try, strive towards with our client base, is right now, I just simply ask your listeners a question right now. Do you know what you've got planned this week that directly promotes your personal values? And if you can't say yes, you've got an opportunity to improve your engagement.
Perfect. That is a great question and a superb point to finish on, I think.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Rach.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Brad. And I will try and loop back round for a part 2, because I love this sort of stuff. It just really spins my wheels.
Oh, pleasure. Anytime.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Brad. Cheers.
Pleasure. See ya. Bye.